You are now listening to the Hunter's Advantage podcast. We preserve the history and sport of hunting through curious conversation and action-packed hunts, as well as offering you tips and strategy for more successful hunts. The Hunter's Advantage podcast is powered by Out on a Limb Manufacturing. Out on a Limb is a family-owned company based right here in Oklahoma that makes tree stands, saddle platforms, climbing sticks, and so much more.
Christian, I have a quick question.
What's that?
What bites down harder, a hippo or an alligator?
No idea.
It's a trick question. The Ridge Runner 2.0 bites harder than both of them. But all jokes aside, we use these products all across the land on public or private. These help us get into any tree we want and hunt where the deer actually are.
Most men go to the grocery store for their meat, but these products help you go to God's grocery store. I have used the Out on a Limb Ridge Runner 2.0 and the Shakar sticks for the last few years hunting public land bucks, and I've actually shot several bucks out of this setup. If you want to support the podcast and get some Out on a Limb equipment, make sure to go to outonalimbmfg.com and use code HNTA10 for 10% off at checkout. Once again, if you want to support the podcast, go to outonalimbmfg.com and use code HNTA10 at checkout for 10% off. Now let's get back to the podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Hunter's Advantage podcast. Me and Jake are excited for a very special episode today. I don't know if you read it in the chat before, but you know this is episode 200.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that pretty sick?
I've seen it, but I didn't acknowledge it.
It didn't register, did it?
That's crazy.
When I posted the last one on YouTube and then Apple and Spotify and stuff, I saw 199 and I was like, dude, 200, it's next. I didn't know this thing would even exist 200 episodes in. It's kind of hard to fathom, but here we are.
We had a message come through the other day that was kind of crazy. I'm trying to find it to see exactly how many hours he's listened to the podcast, but
that was sick.
You have the screenshot?
Yeah, I don't know. I've got to find that. We have to find that because that was sick.
Was it on Snapchat?
No. It was on Instagram. A guy had sent us, and I want to say his name because he's probably our best.
I mean, say his name. I mean, he deserves it.
He's probably our best podcast listener. Oh, no way. He literally just messaged us 14 minutes ago, but it was about something we said to him. So it is Dylan Cole 99. And he had listened to 4,029 minutes of the Hunter's Advantage podcast. 4,000 minutes. Oh, if I had to listen to us for 4,000 minutes, it said he's a top 1% fan. He said, huge fan of y'all. Keep doing what you're doing. And then I said, you're a stud. Thanks for the support. And then he sent a picture of the rating and review. So he just sent that to us. So, hey, Dylan, we appreciate it. Top 1%. He's probably the only one in the 1% that's ever listened to.
Yeah. He is the 1%. He's not in the 1%. He is the 1%. What do you mean?
Well, when it said 4,000 minutes of the show, I was like, have we done 4,000 minutes of podcast? Is there that much? If there's 4,000 minutes,
how many hours does that break down to? I'm an idiot. 4,000.
Do it. I mean, do the math.
By 60. That's dang near 67 hours.
So, if someone has listened to that,
he's put in a good week and a half of his life just straight up listening to us.
Listening to the pod. Man, I appreciate it. I didn't even... The thing is if there's that much of my voice on the internet, you could probably do one of those AI encoders where it gets you, like, you take their voice and then you type it out, say whatever you want. It's probably like, I love crossbows, corn piles, and shooting them.
Hey, I do like me a corn pile, so you can just snip this one. I mean,
yeah.
You don't have to go through all that AI generation stuff.
Yeah. Oh, there's no telling what's out there on. But yeah, thank you guys for 200 episodes of the show. It's honestly incredible that people are still here listening.
Also, thank you guys for using the codes, whether that be, if you buy Out on a Limb stuff or any of the Exodus stuff. Thank you, because we got a little update on some code usages and not too shabby. So appreciate
Not too shabby is an understatement. You guys have really put on and bought some stuff. And by the way, the stuff that you bought, I think, is quality gear, so fair trade. But you guys have really showed out for us, and we really appreciate you guys using the code.
Anyways, what are we talking about today?
So We kind of got a little bit of a blended episode today. We're going to talk about the Texas decoy buck that I shot, which was, dang, dude, 12 or 11, 18, so November 18th of last month.
It wasn't that long ago.
It wasn't that long ago, especially when you
weeks.
consider Thanksgiving and COVID and all the other stuff that's happened since then. But we're going to do a little bit of a blended episode
I don't think
today.
you're allowed to say that word.
Sorry. China virus.
Chinese sickness.
I went to side note. Okay. Anyways, I'm going to side note here in a second, but we're going to talk about the Texas decoy buck that I shot. And we're going to do some Q&A from TikTok and Facebook and answer some other questions that we've kind of got in the DMs. But I went to dinner last night, like a work dinner, a Christmas party. And one of the guys who was a husband of a lady that I work with, he goes, he was talking about something and he said, the orange man. And he said, but my wife told me not to talk about politics. And Lauren was like, if you're calling him the orange man, I can tell what side of the fence you're on. And he was like, I'm not going to get into that.
Yeah. Oh no, not at a work party.
Yeah. But when he called him the orange man, I was like, Lauren said, you mean Donald Trump? And he said, yeah, that guy. I was like, okay.
Do you mean $1.97 a gallon type man? Or anyways.
Back when I could swipe my card at the pump with no worries when I went hunting. But
that's when I used to look at to like see how much it costs to fill up. Now I just fill up and I'm like, it is what it is at this point.
Just walk. When you see triple digits, you just walk away.
Yeah.
You just walk away. Yeah. No, but I haven't been hunting a ton I guess December's only been around for 6 days, but have you spent very much time hunting mid to late November up until now? Have you been up to, what have you been up to before we
I've been taking my bow for
a hike?
hikes, but other than that, well, not even my bow. It's been gun season here in Oklahoma, so I've been taking my gun on a hike. So I got 2 pieces of private around my house I can hunt, and I have 3 cell cams set up on one property that's only, I mean, it's pretty good acreage, but it's pecan orchard, and timber wise, 3 cell cams is more than enough to at least identify like what's been around there.
Mm-hmm.
And that thing's been awful. I've got a few coon hunters and a few side by sides driving through one of the hotter trails on it. So, long story short, haven't been seeing anything on there. But I went to the other piece of property that I have and took my gun for a walk one evening, and I set out like 3 or 4 trail cameras on the opposite side where no one usually goes, but I don't really have high hopes for that one either. I did find a scrape and a rub that was like still being used because it was super fresh. And so I'm going to go check that probably sometime in the next week or 2, probably just a little bit before Christmas because, you got to stick around for the holidays. So maybe that'll be a Christmas present for me if I open it and I just see like a 190 or something. That would be cool. But yeah, long story short, nothing, because on that other cell cam I have at the property, it gets dogs about, I don't know, at least 3 times a week on it. So, I mean, I can't expect nothing good around here.
Don't you get pumped up for $12 a month when you look and you're like, another dog. Awesome.
Yeah. It's fine though. It's fine.
Maybe your SDs you'll wait till Christmas and check your SDs and they'll have like a 170 hitting it for every day for the last 3 weeks.
I'll be surprised because it's kind of close to a fence line where like, what was it? Back in 2016 or 17 it was at that hay meadow where you and I brush hogged that one place back there. So it's in between that hay meadow and the pond. So it's all that thick timber, where I'm kind of talking about.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's where kind of the rub and the scrape was. And back when I used to hunt it in that blind, I hunted it really frequently too. You'd always hear a 4-wheeler kind of driving, not on the fence line, but maybe 40 yards behind you.
It was pretty close.
Yeah. And there was one time I literally heard like footsteps, and there was obviously human footsteps one evening. And I was like, what are you doing walking around? It's like 25 minutes before it gets dark. Like, this is supposed to be prime time. And I hear human footsteps behind my blind because I was setting up like right on the fence.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well,
long story short, yeah.
Didn't have a good rifle
Publix.
season.
Yeah. I'm going to Publix sometime soon.
Well, I was greeted when I came home for Thanksgiving. I was greeted immediately because Luke wanted to go out, and one of the places that we hunt, some over by your mom's house. Right. And we got out there, and Luke and I are sitting on a pond dam, and like I've shot my first buck like 200 yards away from where we were hunting, and I've shot does off that pond dam and stuff. So it's kind of a little sentimental place to hunt. But we got down on the pond dam and we're not seeing anything. And Luke's like, man, this is crazy. Like, I've been seeing quite a few deer out here because it's cold. Like, it was one of those days during Thanksgiving week where it got down 28, I think, in the mornings.
Yeah, got pretty nippy.
There's a certain neighbor that we know of that like 30 of them hunt. They have like tree villages and tree forts that they build. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. And we're sitting there on the pond and it's like been 30 minutes past light. I'm like, I'm really not seeing anything. Boom. I mean, like startle you that close. And it was probably 115 yards away, maybe less. And I'm like, oh, thank God that's over. Like 5 minutes later, boom. And I said, there goes your 2. You've been looking like Luke's been passing some young bucks. And I said, where
was this opening weekend?
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah.
Or the Monday after opening weekend or something like that. And I said, Luke, you've been passing a couple of young bucks out here, hasn't he? Because he's got to the point where he wants to shoot one with his bow and like he's passing young deer. And
so it's good.
Yeah, it's good. And he said, yeah, they're probably gone now. I'm like, yeah, I know. That was probably them.
Yeah. Right. Did Luke show you his trail cam pictures?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know that one with the messed up right rack? Yep. Like it was just broken or whatever?
Yep.
That's the one Proctor shot for his first tag.
Oh, he ended up killing that one. That's the one he killed?
I think so. Either that, I don't know. He shot
one of the ones he had on camera.
Yes. Yeah. That's either the one he shot or the one he shot at and he couldn't find. So if Luke asked, I meant to relay that message, but I just
so now we know where one of them is.
One of them's gone. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then out of those 2 shots, at least one of the other ones is gone. So
probably
there's always next year. That's just, I mean, to be fair, my dad shot.
He can come down to public with us more often. How about that?
Yeah, exactly.
He'll learn.
So, yeah, he'll learn how it is. But so kind of how the Texas decoy buck, the story of that one even started was Lauren and I were planning on coming up to Bonita for Thanksgiving, and Lauren had messaged me. One of her roommates from college lives in North Texas. I became pretty good friends with her husband over the last 3 or 4 years. Like they've came and stayed with us. His name's Jake. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's like the 8th Jake that I know.
Yeah.
I told him to when we were there. I said, "Yeah, I got like 8 Jakes in my phone." He's like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I like they're all good friends too. They're not like just like acquaintances. Like I know like 8 of them, and it's hilarious.
I mean, but it comes with the name. You got to be a good guy to be named
have
Jake.
That name. Mm-hmm. So Johnny and Jake, Lauren had messaged me like a couple weeks before, like while we were on our vacation. She said, "Hey, do you care if we leave?" We were planning on leaving like on Friday or Saturday and coming up to stay for a week. And she said, "Do you mind if we leave on Saturday and go stay with Johnny and Jake?" I was like, "Okay." It's like, sure. Like that sounds good because it's kind of a halfway point, you know, when you're driving up to Bonita, like it's a little, just kind of a stop. And so we were going to stay for 24 hours and then just keep driving through, you know, get to spend some time with them. And they had a kid this last year. So, Lauren had met, their kid and I hadn't yet. And, she was already like 8 months old. So I was like, well, I don't want to wait till she's like a full grown adult.
Boy, or
girl. We were driving up there and, it was funny because Jake had texted me, a couple days before, because he's been hunting quite a bit, and he said, "Hey, do you want to go hunting on Saturday?" I was like, "Sure." Like either way, I'll go with you. You know, like I'll go out there and go with you. But I wasn't planning on shooting anything. And he's like, "Cool." I already asked Johnny, and she said that we could. I was like, "Cool." So that means that Lauren was going to be hanging out with Johnny, and I was going to get to go hunting. So we drove up there, and it was like about noon. And Jake's like, "Yeah, well, you about ready to start getting around?" And I was like, "Yeah, like let's get around and let's go." I wasn't really thinking much of it. Like it was pretty hot still. I think it was like 60s, 70s, maybe.
Probably.
In that mid-November. Yeah.
I mean, it's December 6th right now, and I think it got up to like 62 today. So
it was 70s here. Yeah. It was 70s. But no, we went out and kind of goofed around for a little bit, was driving around up the property, and our buddy Micah pulled one of his stands, and then we were kind of driving around. And so they took me to one of these wheat fields, and they were like, "Hey, there's been, few mature 10-pointers in here. Like, if you see one of those, for sure." And then they showed me a few bucks. It's like, "No, on these." It's like, okay, like, no worries. I've seen them once. I can I can identify what needs to be shot and what doesn't, and
Mm-hmm.
use my discretion. But they drove up, and Micah had a.
Are those there like pretty big bodied deer? Or because when I think
Not
of like a
typically.
Texas buck, I usually think of like, almost like Southeast Oklahoma deer, where it's basically a poodle with antlers on their head.
Yeah, no, not really. It's interesting. I think they're bigger than that. Now, are they a Western Oklahoma 250 pounds live weight? No, they're not that, but they're kind of somewhere in between those two. But so we drove on the edge of this wheat field, and they kind of got in this inside corner next to a really good bedding area. But we had the wind good where it was blowing out. Like this was like a big wheat field, and it was blowing out way the perfect direction. And like there's big timber on my right side and just wheat on my left. And I got up we got there, and Micah was like, "Hey, I got a decoy." Like he had one of those Flambeau decoys, and they're actually pretty nice, by the way. I didn't know Flambeau made a good deer decoy, but he's like, "Hey, I got this. Do you want to set it up?" And I had not planned on going on this hunt. I had no stock in this hunt. I was planning on going out and hanging out with them. So I was like, sure, I don't care. I'm not planning on shooting a deer. Like, just throw it out. So he threw it out, and he took one of the antlers off like Elliot. He's like, well, at least if one sees this, it won't be nearly as intimidating. I was like, okay, whatever. So
you think that's actually a thing?
I think so. I have like one decoy. I've hunted with Jake Ayers quite a bit, and we've hunted with 2 antlers on the decoy and had great luck doing that. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if there's anything to it or not. I'm sure.
When you get Bronson Strickland back on the podcast and kind of,
he probably.
I don't know if he'd have any. Yeah, I mean, he probably would, because I know they did a study on. Remember us talking about I forget which study it was called, but where they took artificial antlers and put them on a young buck and an old buck.
Yeah.
So like, surely he would know something related to that, whether it only has one antler or a half broken one, or I don't know.
Yeah. It's interesting. We just took it off because, well, Micah, it was his idea. He took it off because he's like, well, it's a little less intimidating. And I'm like, well, he's going to look out and see an antler, so it doesn't matter to me, Mm-hmm. And like I said, low hanging fruit. I'm not planning on shooting a deer at all. So I'm like, set it up how you want. I don't care.
Right.
So he sets it up at like 19 yards and kind of quarters it into the wind a little bit. And I'm like, sweet, sounds good to me. So I got up in a tree, and Micah and Jake have these sticks. Like they're like, yeah, we got these pretty big sticks. Like talking about out on a limb. They're like, do you have any sticks you recommend? And I showed him my backpack, and the sticks are like this long. Yeah. And Jake was like, well, check these out. And he pulled out these Novik sticks. Dude, they were like 3.5 foot long.
Were they heavy?
And they had 4 of them. No, they're like tubular. So they each had 4 of them. So I get up in this tree that Micah has already sawed out, because they're hanging hunting a ton on this place, like just learning and hanging hunting and stuff. Learning about the property. And so I look up, and Micah's like where he had put his platform was like 25 feet up.
Really?
And I only have 3 sticks, and I have long legs, but 3 sticks are not going to cut it on 25 feet. I'm not getting 25 feet. So I look up, and I put my stick, and I get up to hang my platform, and there's like a half of a tree in my face, like an entire bush. And so I'm like, man, that kind of sucks. So I set my platform and, seat it down and step up on it, get up in my saddle. And I look, and there's like a half thorn bush in my face. And I'm like, well, that's not going to work. So I just started grabbing, cut. There was one behind me, grab, cut. And by the time I got done trimming, I was like, my cover's gone. Like I have no cover. I'm skylined. This tree is as narrow. It's like as narrow as a pine. And basically all the limbs are gone, like hunting pines. So I'm like, okay, this could be a problem going forward. But low stakes. I'm like, I'm not going to shoot a buck or anything. So whatever, I'm at least going to be comfortable. And if one comes in, I'm going to have a shot. So I got all my stuff set up, my camera, my bow, and I was sitting there, and I think we got in the stand around 2:30-ish, and it's right before 5. So daylight savings has already happened, and it's like pitch black at like 5:45, maybe less. This time of year.
You're talking about the evening?
Yeah. So I'm sitting up in the tree, and it's like 4:45, and you know how when you haven't seen anything, I don't know if you do this, I do this, but if you haven't seen anything like an entire set, you're like, well, what would rattling or calling do? You can't hurt it. I'm already seeing nothing. Yeah. That kind of thing. I started to get that thought in my mind because I had these squirrels behind me playing butt
Tag.
touch or whatever they were doing. And they had done it so many times. And so it's like 4:45 and I'm considering grabbing my grunt call because I put it in my pocket. I was like, I could use this. And especially since I had the decoy out, I was like, well, if I rattle, at least like if something comes in, they got something to look at. If I grunt, but something comes in, they have something to look at. And like I said, I'm hunting a huge wheat field. So I'm like, if there's a scenario to call, it's probably this scenario, like heat of the rut. I have a decoy. I have a non-intimidating decoy because he's half male, half female. He only has one antler. And it's in the middle of and it's in the middle of this wheat field. So I'm like, I got great visibility. It's probably a good time to call. And so as I'm kind of making that math formula in my head, I hear that steady walk. You know, the squirrel is the
right.
I heard the
had the right cadence.
It was the right cadence. And I was like, that's a buck or that's a deer. Like I knew that was a deer. And so I turn to my right and not 35 yards away, I see not only antlers, a big frame. And I was like, well, that's a big buck. So I still don't know what's going to happen. Like I said, there's no reason for him to come by me besides the decoy. So I'm like, he could just skirt, he could walk out in the field and be 80 yards away. I don't know. So just in case, hit the remote on the GoPro, hit, where he is I hit my main camera and point it to where he would come out. And then I zoomed in a little bit on the camera and made sure it was exposed right. And by the time I did that, I'm looking over and he is just like Jeffrey Dahmer murder stare just on this decoy. Like he can see it through all, there's timber and stuff between him, but he's just standing tall and proud and just staring. And then he's and at this point, I'm like, he's got to come in. Like I saw him look at the decoy.
Was there very many deer out in the field at this point? Or
I haven't seen a deer yet. This is the first deer I saw.
So I'm going to stop you right there because I got a little question to ask. Do you think that decoy was the main reason you killed that deer? And obviously, looking at the footage, it seems that way. You saw the footage? Yeah, it for sure seems that way. But what I think is, even if you didn't call or grunt or rattle or do anything along those lines, my own experiences with hunting, around private land and having a food-based thing you hunt over, whether that be corn or like winter wheat or whatever that is normally it seems like the bucks will kind of have like the little outer transit or the inner transition area within the timber before they make their way out into the field. Mm-hmm. Do you think him seeing that other deer, which would be your decoy out there, made him A, come to that spot, and then B, come there as early as he did?
So I think that he was probably coming out on the field regardless. Really? Or gonna transition maybe to a different part of this bedding area because it's really just one big block of timber that I think he was gonna walk to a new part of a bedding area, possibly scent check it for does or something like that. And I think on his merry way, he just happened to see it. And it probably starked him, because I don't know how social structures in deer work, but I would think if you live on a unpressured piece of private land, you probably know most of the bucks in there. Like as another buck, you've probably seen them, especially out feeding and stuff. So walking and seeing like a new guy on the block, it probably just stops you. Like, what? How'd he get there? I didn't hear him walking. Where the frick did he come from? That all those questions. So that's kind of in my mind. It probably just startled him, and I hadn't called or anything. So that's probably even more of a shock factor. Like when you're walking and you just don't expect anything, and then one's just there, you're probably like, "Oh, what the frick?" That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because he's walking in very thick timber. And then he probably, as soon as he gets visibility out into this field, sees the decoy. And he's like, okay, what the heck? So I think the decoy brought him into bow range. I think he was coming to that area regardless. Gotcha. Yeah. So I hear him hitting the and I got my bow up. I got both cameras rolling at this point, and I just got my bow in my hand and I'm watching. And I hear a whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And I'd like turn my head a little bit. Uh-oh. And he is on the edge of the field, like 3 feet into the timber, on the edge of the field, making a monster scrape, like every stroke was with intention.
What's going through your head at that point?
one, I'm thinking this is awesome because at first when I saw him lock onto the decoy, I was thinking, okay, there's a good chance because at least he sees the decoy. Like, is he going to come up to it? Maybe, maybe not. But he'll at least probably come within 30 yards of it, which would be within bow range. When he started making the scrape, I'm like, he's coming.
Is he downwind of it?
At this point, he's upwind of it, and he has to circle to get downwind of it. Is what.
Okay, so that's good. That's good. Yeah.
So Micah set the decoy up in the right manner because the buck would have to circle around him to get downwind of him, and that's either coming behind me or coming in front of me. Either way is fine. So he starts hitting that scrape, and to me, what I don't know what he was saying, but to me, what he was saying was, "This is your last chance to run off." Like, I've walked in, you saw me. Obviously, you haven't moved in a millimeter, and I'm gonna scrape here. And if you don't move, I'm going to kick your ass. That's kind of what I think he was like, because you saw the neck on him. He was a mature deer.
That and the ears.
The neck
on the footage ears. Walking in, that was impressive because, I mean, if anyone's like been around horses in their life, you know, when a horse gets pissed off, the ears go flat back on its head. And I mean, usually not a good sign, especially if you're on the back of it. But for in the deer world, if they have the ears pinned straight back and they start puffing up like that, you know something's about to go down.
Exactly. So he hits that scrape, maybe 30 seconds, and he makes a good one. By the way, there's a rub like right under my tree. So I'm like, all right, there's bucks in this area. Like immediately I knew that. And Micah and Jake had hunted the area and they're like, yeah, there's some bucks in here, but you know, like, why not set up the decoy to have him closer?
Right.
But he hits the scrape. And the second he steps out on the field, I draw. And he's still probably 30 yards from me, but he's 25 yards diagonally from the decoy. So he's got some distance to close. And the reason I drew right there was, like I told you earlier in the story, was I'm like skylined. No timber around me. Backdrop's not good. Closest tree is still 10 yards behind me. No foliage. You know, we're starting to get to that point where all the leaves are gone. And I thought, I'm willing to spook him immediately at the shot that when he comes in, it'll be perfect. So I could have waited until he got in, but I just thought at that point, well, he'd be looking at the decoy, but he's still 19 yards away. And drawing on a deer when you're 15 foot off the ground from 19 yards away didn't seem like the smartest thing from my perspective. So I drew immediately. And just like you said, I mean, you saw the footage. When he came in, hair bristled up. Every hair was like just like a cat. All the hair bristled up, ears back. And Winston does it. My French bulldog does it. I don't know why he walks this way, but have you seen horses that kind of walk sideways? Like they walk with their butt in a different direction. It's almost like they're walking in sideways, not straight at it. It's basically
like a dog trying to like love up on you after you get onto him. You know, he kind of is like, I'm sorry, but it's in a more like aggressive manner.
Yeah. Well, that's what he did. Was his head is kind of neutral and his ears are back, hair is up, and he's like almost sideways walking at him. Like he's not walking straight at him. He's like sideways and side eyeing. Posturing up bad. And my first thought while I'm at full draw is he's going to hit the decoy. And you've seen
were you going to let him do that, or
I wasn't going to shoot him walking? Right. If that's your question. So like if he just took off running, I was going to be like, all right, we'll see. And you've seen videos, and Micah even had an experience with this a couple weeks later.
Oh, I've seen Micah's,
yeah. When they hit the decoy and the decoy comes into 5 different parts, it's pretty much over. They run away. So your chance is when they're walking into the decoy. And as he's walking in with those ears back and hair bristled, I'm thinking he's probably going to hit the decoy. I just hope when he hits it and it explodes, he just walks closer to me and not further away. Because when I drew back, I gave up any ability to range. And you asked me when he was walking in on the footage, you said, why didn't you shoot him right there? Like stop him as he's like walking in. Did you not know the range? And I knew he was anywhere when he was walking in from like 22 to 27. And that's a shootable range. But my thought was if he comes to the decoy, he's going to be at 20. So, and I've got my sight on 20, so might as well let him walk into the decoy. He keeps walking and he gets the decoys at 19 and he's probably 23. And did you see him in the video, like stop like he hit a scent trail and just halted.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So we had drove up to the stand, got all the stuff out, stepped out, put the decoy together. Michael wore gloves when he put it together, but there's still 3 guys standing there. So he he stepped where we had stepped, and he kind of started to like back up a little bit.
Yeah.
And as he backed up, I just waited, kind of not anchored correctly. As he walked in, I just kind of followed him and wasn't anchored. When he did that, I was like, okay, time to anchor. So I anchored, and I remembered at this point, I've been in full draw for probably 45 seconds. And I remember my pin.
Yeah, but you're only shooting like what, 50 pounds, 55?
38. That's what's legal in Texas.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But I'm in, easy draw. Like I'm holding what, 3 pounds, 6 pounds. So I'm in full draw. And I remember my arm is a little tired. My pin dips below him, and I'm like pulling through the shot as it dips below him. I'm like, no. Like,
oh my God.
I'm like, don't do that. So I just kept inching it as I'm pulling, and it got where I wanted it and broke. And I probably hit him 2 inches higher than where I was aiming, but the exit was perfect too. But when I shot, I stuck it in the ground, and you see him kind of hit this half U running away, and he runs probably 70 yards and stops. And I'm like fumbling to get another arrow in. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to shoot him again. And then he runs another 20 yards, and I just hear the, and I just see him crash.
So you watch him fall.
Watched him fall. Yeah. And you can see it. You can see it in the 360 GoPro, I think, picked it up too, but watched him fall. It was awesome because it was, in every sense of the word, just a bonus buck. Like, I'm going out with a buddy, not planning on hunting. There's only a couple deer that he's like, hey, these are mature bucks. And I'm like, what are the odds of me going out in a random spot with a decoy and having one of the bucks that you can shoot come out on a one evening hunt as I'm passing through? Like, not super high, you know? So that happened, and I'm like, I'm immediately like, it's just my year. That's just what I'm saying. Like, I'm blown away at this point. I'm like, whoa. Because when I got into the stand, do you ever have those times where you get in the stand and you're like, probably this time, like this, it could happen this time?
Yeah, but I'm usually disappointed at the end of the hunt, though.
Well, in 99% of the time, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But when I got up in the stand, I thought about it. I was like, right date, right time to have a decoy, good spot, food. I wasn't expecting it to happen, but it's like, dang, I kind of had a good feeling like this could happen. So, yeah, that happens, and I'm just like blown away. I'm like, are you serious? And at the time when I shot him, I had my 7x5 that I had shot. And I showed Jake and Micah the skull cap. I'm like, this is a nice buck. And when I shot that buck, I thought he was bigger than the one I had shot before.
You thought the Texas buck was bigger than the one?
Yeah, I did.
Well, I could see that because frame wise, they're pretty equal on that. But your Oklahoma buck has a little bit more mass to it.
I should probably describe the buck I shot. He was a mainframe 10, he ended up scoring like 141. I rough scored him like in 5 minutes. That's what he scored, roughly. And he's like 17, 18 inches wide and good tine length. Like one side was beautiful, tine length. The other side had a little bit less tine length, but he was a 6x5. So one side had 6 and the other side had 5. So he's an 11 technically. Good eye guards, just like a good frame. What you would think of a nice mature like 10 pointer.
As soon as you FaceTime me, like holding a buck, because I forget what you said. You FaceTimed and you were like, just missed a giant. Just missed a giant. Yeah. And I was like, you're on the ground, so I don't know why you'd be doing that. And then you flip to it and you're holding, now granted, they're both good sides, but you're holding the better side. And I was like, in my mind, I was like, I think he just got his PB again this year. Because I mean, I love a framey deer, and even if your Oklahoma buck scores better than the Texas buck, like I think I like your Texas buck better just from the frame. He's
probably a little more framey. Like he kind of comes out, you know, and so he's nice and wide. He could have been 150 inch deer that one time. That one side,
I think if the other side matched, he would be almost 150 on the dot.
Yeah, exactly. The other side, I think the longest point on that side was like 7 or something like that. And on the other side, it had like a 10-inch G2.
Yeah.
So it was just like a couple inches shorter each time. But no, he was a stud and had a huge neck on him. Like,
all right,
huge
so
neck.
You're in the stand, you just shot him, you watched him fall over. What do you like? Obviously you're thinking like this is just your year, but do you still give him a little bit of time, or you just like say, hey, I seen him fall, but let's go put hands on him?
So Jake and them aren't hunting too far away at like 300 yards away. So I'm thinking, how much more time is left till dark? And it's like pretty much getting dark at this point. So I'm like, well, of course I want to go look at him, because I'm like, I think that might be the biggest buck I ever shot. Like, I thought it was bigger at the time. I'm like, frame wise, he is a little bit bigger, but just not score wise. I thought I'd shot him. I was kind of overwhelmed because I shot him. And then I thought, I just came to Texas, which, by the way, I've talked so much crap on Texas deer hunting. So this buck did not deserve to die by my hand. But I shoot this buck and I'm thinking, I just immediately thought about the year that I was having. Opening day buck, shot a buck with my recurve, shot my PB October 30th, and then go on a whim, just a fun invite, a bonus hunt. Wasn't planning on shooting a deer. I'm wearing a sweater. I'm not even wearing camouflage. I'm wearing brown jeans and a sweater, like a deer hunt. There's a brown sweater with a deer emblem that my uncle gave me. Like, look like a turd in the tree. I'm all brown. And I was just kind of messing around, like not expecting much of it. And I just shoot what I think is probably one of the bigger deer I've ever shot. And he is like probably the third highest score deer I've ever shot. And so I'm just thinking, wow, God is good, because this year already was way better than I expected it to be. And it got even sweeter. And then immediately, my next thought is, it's only November 18th. I could still keep going. Like, this is insane. And then, like you said, I think when I FaceTimed you, you're like, this is how it goes. Sometimes you can't do anything wrong, and sometimes you can't do anything right. And you said, this is your year. Nothing is going wrong. And I was like, you're right. That is 100%.
That means what state is next up to bat?
Yeah, I have a tag in Nebraska. That's probably not going to happen. It's just so far. It's like 16 hours to get where I hunt. But I don't know. I'm thinking about a January buck now, like where I would love to go to Arkansas or Missouri or Ohio. I'd love to do something else.
I mean, a Missouri tag for the whole year is like $225.
Right. Exactly.
Unlike Arkansas, where you said like the one day was like $100 and like a full year is
getting their money out of the non-residents.
Yeah, they are.
No, but I remember the first thing when I told Lauren, she said, two things. She said, don't talk crap on Texas deer hunting again. I said, okay, fair. Like, this is a good one. I won't do that again. And then she said, because before, as we're driving up, I had already shot 3 bucks. Lord willing, it was amazing. And she said, so you're done for the year after this, right? And I shoot that buck. And she goes, now you're really done, right? Like, you're satisfied? And I said, I'm content. I'm blessed. I'm happy. Satisfied is not the word, though. She said, are you going to keep doing this?
It's just I think what it is just like a hamster wheel. You know, you keep going round and round, and, you know, you want more and more and more. But I mean, I don't know.
And eventually you just run out of season, so you have to quit. That's what it is.
It's you are content, but you're not satisfied until January 15th or whenever the last buzzer sounds, really.
That's how it is for me, at least. Like, I'm forced to stop. That's what stops me, is the legality of not being able to hunt anymore, or else I would keep going. But no, I mean, I get down and I'm just like really excited, and I walk over to the buck, and I tried to walk pretty slow because I saw him like the second I got out of the tree. And so, you know, when you can see him, and I'm like, I don't want to look at him. Like, he looks big. And I started walking.
I don't know that feeling, but yeah, continue.
Shut up. I am walking towards him, and I'm shooting those VPA 150 grains. And
did you ever find your arrow?
Yeah, well, it was stuck in the dirt behind him.
Oh, did it?
It was sticking like that out of the ground. And I'm shooting those VPA 150 grain single bells. And to be fair, I shot 3 bucks with them this year. Only one of them was like at a great blood trail because it hit a main artery on a deer. The other two were like they only ran 20 yards and fell over, so I didn't even really look for blood. But on this one, he had ran a little bit further. So as I'm walking up to him, looks like a blood trail, tip of the thumb over a water hose, spraying it. I mean, it's like, when you walk up to a buck and you're like, this is kind of nasty because there's so much blood. It was like, it was spraying the last 20 yards bad. And he was laying in like a pile, like the size of his body. So I instantly was like, ugh. And I like dragged him out of it.
Bad, but that's kind of what you want. You know what I mean? Like
he died in 15 seconds.
It looks awful, but I mean, it was easy to follow. And he, like you said, died within 15 seconds. I don't know what a hunter could ask for besides that.
You can't, it's almost, but it's so much carnage that I'm like, I don't even really want to sit here and like look at all this blood because I pick him up and I'm like, God, he's beautiful. He still has this like dark chocolate coat. Like he's got a huge neck, not a single hair like out of place. And one of the things I've really started liking about deer and admiring is, the skin around their eyes is like a real soft. It's like a real soft gray or brown, and it almost looks wet. Like I looked at him and he had that, and I was just admiring him, looking at the coat and looking at the rack. And so I dragged him out of that pile of blood and was just holding him up. And I remember holding up the frame and being like, this is a freaking stud. And I sent you the picture. You were asking for more pictures, but I had like no service at all.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Trust me.
But I ended up sending you that one picture on Snapchat of him and like him laying on the ground. And that picture makes him look huge. Like makes him look really big. But you saw him in person. What did you think of him? I brought the head.
I thought that was a whole lot of antler because he killed at the 18th. When did I see that buck?
It's like the 19th or 20th.
Oh, it was when you're in Veneta. Yeah. Old Shout and Sack parking lot. Yeah, no, he was a good buck, dude. I'm just still in awe of like how many bucks you shot this year.
Laura and I obviously we're like we've gotten to the point where we like talk more about like a family and stuff. And she's like, could you like hang it up on this season? And I'm like, hang it up's the wrong word, but I could be satisfied with this season.
What you do is you plan around it where it's like, that you ain't pulling a KC Smith and having it born in November
like
or something
2 weeks
like
before.
Yeah. So what you could do is like shoot for a summer baby. That way it's like at least maybe can hold its head up halfway, or at least you don't have to be around 24/7 when it comes to November. Lauren, y'all be used to it is what I'm trying to say.
Exactly. But I mean, it was, I can't believe it either. Like I really can't, because I don't know if all of them will. My thought is maybe 2, like because I dropped him off to Jared and he said, hey, how many? Because I dropped him off. My tax.
You're going to have to get a discount, son.
There's got to be a 4-for-1. Like
not even a 4-for-1, but just tell them like, hey, what are you thinking? Like $50 off a piece, because I mean, you got to think that's $200 right there. If you get $50 off a piece, I don't know. We'll have my podcast.
Black bear there too.
Get 50%. Oh, that's true.
Yeah. No, but I drop them all off at Jared, and Jared does incredible work. So I'm like looking at every one of the racks like, man, this one would look good. He can make a turd look awesome. Like you could shoot a forky and he'd mount it and you'd be like, God, it looks good. That kind of thing. So I drop them all out and I dropped them. I was walking to the truck and Jared was skinning out somebody else's buck, like caping it off the
head.
Yeah. Off the head. And he said, how many are you putting in the book? Like the Pope and Young book. And I said, hopefully 4, because they scored 127, 140, 141, and 150. And the only 2 that I don't know about are the 127. That's close. That's about as close as you can get.
Yeah, but he's really symmetrical.
He's really symmetrical. They netted him in where I shot him on that draw hunt, they netted him at like 125 and an eighth, but you know how that goes. Like,
Right.
That could have been he could be 123 gross. I don't know. But the 140 is the lopsided deer. You remember that one?
Yeah.
He's got like that one huge side, and the other side's like still probably 125 inch 8-point if he had match, but he's got like one huge side and one not huge side. And so the question is that not huge side gonna be 125 net?
I mean, in the scheme of the Pope and Young, so obviously for those that don't know, to make Pope and Young, it has to at least net 125
as a typical.
Obviously, we don't really hold that to much account, but if you're trying to get a piece of paper, then yeah, that's cool. But that is going to hurt you in a way that, just because you have that one awesome side and then the one, that's just still great, but like just decent compared to the other side. I don't know, man. I haven't seen him in a while, but he might make it. He really might make it.
I think I did the math and I got like 128 net on that one. 127.
I think I'd be more worried about that buck than your one you shot with the recurve.
You think so?
I think so.
He's pretty symmetrical. The recurve buck is.
He looks very symmetrical. What you should have did is did you ever score him yourself?
No, I didn't end up scoring him myself.
It's fine. You always add a couple more inches anyway. So
yeah, he's 130, I think.
Yeah.
I didn't score myself. It got a rock. So I was like, okay, this satisfies me.
That's all that matters.
And I'm gonna have to spend a half a day up there if I'm gonna have Jared score all of them, because he scores them like if he'll score them 2 or 3 times if they're close, just to like make double sure. Mm-hmm. Like that buck I shot last year, 6x7. He said he scored it 3 times and it netted 125 and 1/8.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow.
He scored 142 and 7/8 and it netted 125.
It takes him a while to do it because when he scored my buck,
were you up there when he did it?
Yeah. Well, because he had like a whole group of guys the day before, but I didn't know about it. And I texted him like that night and he was like, "Oh man, you should have been up here earlier today." But yeah, bring it. This was like 2 years ago. And he was like, bring it tomorrow or the next day or something like that. And it was me and another guy in there when I walked in, he was scoring the other guys. And so I don't know, it probably took him 10, 15 minutes to score it.
To score yours?
Yeah.
And he only scored yours once. Well, yours wasn't it wasn't close to like not making the book or anything. So like you only had to score it once.
I made Cy Curtis, son. What do you mean?
So what's Cy Curtis? 135? 145?
So I always thought it was 145, but Justin, I guess, enlightened all of us when we were on our November trip, and he said it was 135. And I looked it up, and it is 135. So
I should have a Cy Curtis.
Potentially, yeah.
The 7x5 should be a Cy Curtis.
Yeah.
Net.
Let me just double check so I'm not an idiot. I think
that's it. And by the way, for people that listen, that's an Oklahoma only record.
Yeah.
It's not a broader record book.
That's honestly a pretty good that could either be a short long form or a for sure short form. Just talk about, at least
Cy Curtis.
You got Pope and Young, you got Cy Curtis, and you got Ben Crockett. Well,
there's other states I've been listening to recently, like apparently Ohio has like the Ohio Big Buck Club, which is like only for Ohio. So I guess other states.
I think that's pretty cool, though.
I think so too.
So Cy Curtis, recognized the trophy game and hunter. Cy Curtis was established in 1972. I don't care about all that. Jesus Christ.
Got some word vomit on the page there.
Well, it popped up like the top 3 Cy Curtises ever in Oklahoma, and the top one was like 248. And I was like, how the hell?
Jeez. 248.
248.
What a monster.
So typical whitetail deer, Cy Curtis, 135. And I assume that's net.
135 net. Yeah.
Hey. What was your black bear hit? Oh, it wasn't in Oklahoma though. You shot yours in Canada. Never mind.
Is there a Cy Curtis for black bear?
There is.
What's the score on that?
It just says 19.
Okay, it was not Cy Curtis. I think mine was 18 and 2/8 on the black bear. So my black bear was Pope and Young, but it was not Cy Curtis.
Oklahoma mule deer 155 for Cy Curtis.
Man, it's a big one.
Yeah, that's neat, man. So that October 1st and then October 30th.
It went
Right?
October 1st, October 27th, and October 30th, and November 18th were the 4 this year. Man, from October 27th to October 30th, he couldn't have knocked me off that mountain. I was feeling good.
Well, that's probably the only reason you stayed on our vacation, because you're like, listen, I'm at the high of highs right now, so nothing. I'm just here to hang out, baby.
Well, I brought my $2. I brought my $2, and I'm like just sitting at camp waiting for a call to drag another one out, and that was all I was there for. And it did happen. If I would have stayed a couple more days, it would have happened like 2 more times. But I got on the highway. I get about 20 minutes from where we're hunting, and Justin calls me. He goes, "Where are you at?" You know, those kind of calls.
Mm-hmm.
And then he calls me another 10 minutes later. So now I'm 30 minutes away. And he was like, "Where are you at?" I said, I'm on the way home. I told you guys I was leaving Friday. And he said, "Well, we got a buck on the roof, like on the rut wagon on
Jordan's buck."
Yeah. And I'm like, "Are you serious?" He said, "Yeah, the big kahuna killed one." He said, "Jordan killed one." And I was like, "No way." Like, of course. I'm 30 minutes away, turn around, 30 minutes there, 30 minutes back. Like, this is going to be a 2-hour detour. And I was like, "A big one?" And he said, "It's a good one." And I was like, "Oh," I said, "I can't." I said, "If it's a booner, I'll come back." But I was like, "I can't."
I wish it would have happened while you were there, because you had all the podcast stuff, and we could have ripped one out with Jordan for his first one down there.
I know, but yeah, the location was awesome. I mean, it's been good.
Oh, I was going to say, so what's next on the docket for you? Like, dude, realistically,
no idea.
You're going to smack a couple does though.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Oklahoma Special Doe Day, I think, is the 18th of December, and I'm definitely shooting my limited does. So I'm going to try to get 4 does.
I'm just saying, Jake Ayers invited me down to go smack a doe, and I know y'all got some big body does down there. So if you're down there, I will more than happy make the drive.
Oh, yeah, you should come.
Because I got 3 doe tags left, and I don't know, the doe around here. If I shoot these doe, there's not going to be any more deer left to see for Gavin and Gage and all those kiddos. So that's kind of where I'm at.
I've been talking to Carol. I have to convince him to come back to shoot a doe, but I've been talking to him about shooting some does because we need to on the lease, because we shot $2 and we got to shoot some does. Like, I had it one time.
I mean, if he's not willing to, I'll fill my tags in his spot. Obviously, I know y'all don't want to just go shoot 15 doe in there, but
we could shoot 5, no doubt, because I hunted one time in October in there, and I saw 15 does and one like 7-pointer, little basket racker, and I was like, and it was 15 different does. It wasn't, how you see 5 and then they go off and they come back the same direction. No, it was like 5 there, 3 from there, 2 from behind me.
Really?
They came from every direction. Yeah. And a bunch of big old doe nannies, that the big ones that like to blow, those gotta go. Does. Yeah. So I need to do that. And then it'd be fun too, because Drew's planning on coming back and hunting that big 10-point that we've had on the other lease.
Oh, so there might be some bone to actually go down too.
That could happen. If I, Carol, and Drew came, that would, we could really put some deer in the freezer, put some down. So that's for sure happening. I got to do some doe management on the lease. So that's got to happen. But from a buck perspective, it might be a January type of thing, but I don't mind hunting January. I really don't.
No, I mean, so here in Oklahoma, we don't get like an abundant amount of snow. If it snows, it's mainly just, I don't know, like a thin layer of ice that actually stays on the ground, just because, I mean, the temperature fluctuates like pretty stupid down here, where it'll snow and it'll be below freezing for 5 days in a row, and then it'll snow, and then I don't know, the ground won't be below freezing temperature, so the snow won't stay most of the time. And so that's something I've always really wanted to do, is like shoot a deer, and primarily a buck, in the snow, and just where the blood trail would hopefully be a little bit easier to find. Does that make sense? Because I remember last year going to Kansas, and so you and I went on that freaking Arctic blizzard that rolled through Kansas, Oklahoma, and I guess most of the United States. And we were in Kansas, and you went with me the first day, and we seen some deer tracks kind of running through all the beans and stuff. But the next two times I went back, I moved to where that big 8-point came out. And as I was walking through that little finger of trees right there, you could see exactly how the deer were moving and how they were using this little ridge timber line type ordeal. And it was really interesting. Like places where you thought they would move, the snow was pretty clean. And obviously it was fresh snow because it was shitting and getting on us, while we were there. So all this was at least in a 2 to 3 day period. So I don't know. It would just be super interesting, like especially hang and hunt in the snow. That way you can kind of like see what's actually been using this area more frequently without having to need like a trail camera.
Well, and that's kind of why I wouldn't mind getting Midwestern for January, would be being able to hunt in that snow. We did it. We've shot a deer at the Rosa in the snow.
Remember that was miserable. Yeah.
Well, it was terrible.
Yeah, but
it wasn't like a blood trail.
Was that during doe day though?
It was during special doe day. Yeah.
I was about to say, because it was too cold to be like a November type ordeal for it just being rifle.
Oh, it was. Yeah, that was terrible.
It was -6.
Well, and we hunted when we hunted in Kansas it would been right after Christmas, right before New Year. It was -28 wind chill.
Mm-hmm.
-28. And I thought, you can't even fathom how cold that actually is. Like if you quit moving, things just start freezing. Like your eyes. Oh,
your eyelids, dude. Yeah. Like your eyelashes start freezing on your bottom one. And, it's a bad time to look for a microphone that potentially fell on the ground in a snowstorm.
On the bright side, like you're saying though, when there's snow, there's no lying where they're walking. Like that snow was not there before. I remember when we stepped out of the truck and there was tracks right there that were going down that tree line on the edge of that bean field. Like, well, they're in here. They have to be.
Right.
Like I like that kind of hunting. I mean, obviously when it's -28, but the snow, the cold, the food, back to food kind of thing. I like it because it gets so cold that it's not a battle of wills, but it's one of those situations where you're going to eat.
They're going to have to eat at some point for sure.
You have to. And if you don't eat, you at least have to move. You can't sit there just bedded. And they're more predictable than they are during the rut and stuff. So if you see like a nice trail coming into a bean field in the middle of December, you're like, you ain't slick. I know you're here.
And that's exactly what happened though. Like I literally followed those footprints the day I went back by myself. I followed those footprints and there was 2 openings that they could potentially go out of. And I set a little bit further back on the back one, or I set just a little bit further back than the first one. Cause I thought they were going to like the predominant trail where I thought they were going to walk through was like 30 yards. And the other one was about 15 yards. And it just so happened that buck in Kansas took the 15-yard trail instead of the 30-yard trail and absolutely caught me with my pants down.
Would not have been bad if you would have, like, if it was warm enough to be in the saddle. It wouldn't have been bad.
Oh, no. That would have been ideal, but it wasn't. So,
what do you think it was the same buck that we saw the few days before? Different 8-pointer?
It was a different 8-point.
Still nice and wide?
He was for sure a shooter. 100%.
I've been using the new Exodus Rival cell camera for the last couple months, and I have found a beautiful mainframe 8-point with tons of stickers to go after this fall.
Ooh.
One thing I do appreciate about Exodus trail cameras is all of the cameras share the same data plan, so you only pay for what you need. A lot of cell cam companies charge you for HD pictures. I've seen prices of $5 for 50 HD pics. Exodus is going to give you unlimited HD pictures right to your phone, which is awesome when you're sitting there in the middle of the summer and it's 100 degrees and you just want to binge a bunch of trail cam photos.
If you're looking for a solid cell camera with great performance and a 5-year no BS warranty, go check them out. So as we all know, hunting gear is something people can make way too complicated. Arrows can be the exact same way. Instead of going down all those rabbit holes, trying to sift through the endless information that's online and you're not really sure if it's right or wrong, Exodus makes it simple to get the right arrow for your exact setup.
So go online to the Exodus Arrow Builder. It takes less than a minute. You're going to enter your draw weight, your draw length, and how heavy of a point you're shooting. And it's going to be that simple. Let the guys at Exodus take care of the rest.
So if you're interested in Exodus Rival cell cameras or a new set of their MMT arrows, just go to ExodusOutdoorGear.com and use code HA15 for 15% off anything on the website.
Once again, that is ExodusOutdoorGear.com. Use code HA15 at checkout for 15% off. Now let's get back to the podcast. December shooter.
Yeah. So they're out there. I mean, they're out there, but I think we're going to do another podcast about the late season stuff. So
yeah. So I haven't hunted much since then. I have not hunted in December at all. What's your plan for the rest of December? Or at least the intermediate term?
Yeah, I'm going to try to go. Obviously, I'm still going to monitor like my private land, and because I have had a few new bucks show up. Now, granted, the biggest one's maybe 110 inches, which I showed you a picture of, and there's another one just a smidge smaller than him that has a broken rack. I don't know who he's been messing with, but apparently he's got his butt kicked a couple times. Going to be monitoring that, but I want to try to make my way back down to our normal public piece because I tried one closer to the house. Granted, one time, but in and out, all said and done, a round trip, it probably took me hour, 45 minutes round trip from going there, driving to the spot, and then driving back home. And I'm thinking like, find a new area or go scavenge a new area that's still a pretty good trek there and back, or just take a weekend for an extended period of time on spots,
Yeah,
and
higher percentage.
Exactly. I'm going to go with that.
So, and all hope isn't lost on that sort of stuff. You can still get it done on public.
Oh, I'm not even worried about that. Cause like, I mean, I enjoy it. Like I enjoy actually sitting in what feels like hunting temperature, especially in the morning. Cause right now, like the low's still probably 31, 32, just, it's fluctuating between below freezing and above freezing. And I'm talking about the lowest point. So like in the mornings, it's 30 to 32, 33 degrees usually. And so in the evenings, like today it was 31 and then it heated up to like 62. So it's not like it's going to be miserable out there the whole time.
No, not at all. Are you going on is there a cold front coming or like a micro cold front that you're going to try to hunt?
Yeah, there's so we were on a pretty good little cold spell where, and when I say cold spell, you Midwestern guys are probably going to laugh, but the lows were in the 30s. So
that's
for
cold.
us, that's a pretty good cold spell. And I think starting from today up until Friday, I believe it's going to heat back up where the lows are going to be in the 40s. And then I think starting Saturday or Sunday, it's going to drop back down to the 30s again. So I'm kind of, hopefully I'm going to hit like the start of that next cold front and maybe that'll change some stuff, but I don't know. I got an opening to go here soon. So I'm probably going to try to hit that next cold front.
Yeah, no, I mean, that'll be good. Hopefully you can shoot one there and then we can talk about getting Midwestern.
If I get one there, like it's going to have to be pretty solid. Like,
gonna have to be a nice one.
Yeah. Because I mean, I don't know. I've been talking to some people. Well, heck, I've been talking to Cooper for people who you probably haven't heard him a lot on this podcast or himself at all, but we've mentioned the name. He has a YouTube channel. It's Public Land Pretenders, and last year he got it done on January 13th. So you want to talk about on a great one on public land. And so if you want to talk about a guy who probably knows a thing or two about like late season, that's about as late as you could get, at least for here in Oklahoma, because that's 2 days before the season closes.
That's a buzzer beater by every mention of the word.
I don't know. I've been going back and forth with him and he's been, kind of giving me a few pointers on some super late season. Cause we're both studs where we usually don't have a tag especially by January. So, that's a joke, guys. So yeah, he's been giving me some pointers and it's been giving me some hope and stuff and like kind of what to look out for. And I'm very confident. Like I don't have any like discouragement where I'm not burnt out, I should say, just yet.
Still got a little bit, like your tank's at like a fourth. You're not on it yet. I
think I'm a little bit past half.
Really?
Yeah, like I'm still anxious to go.
See, if you got that much fill left, you go shoot one on the first sit, and let's try to go somewhere else.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. Yeah,
actually, go shoot one on the first sit, and then I was gonna say,
I'm just saying
Nebraska, but you won't have
like I'm going to be camping in my truck. So, obviously I won't be getting as good a sleep as I would. So my plan is to wake up super early, uh, in the morning, probably like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning here, drive there for the morning sits, because the morning sits I feel like are going to be the best just because it's a lot colder.
100%. Yeah.
And also when we were there in November, obviously it's a different time frame, but I, I feel like I have a better chance in the morning because in November, all the bucks I seen was in the morning. I seen 3 bucks on this spot, 3 sits in a row. And one of them was a really good one. So even if he's not in the area, I know this is a good little travel place where they like to be. So I'm going to try that. I think first sit in the morning. Then after that, I might do a little wandering and try to find some actual food sign.
But you're not that's interesting because you're not typically I would almost say about as starkly different as you can be. I am like a morning person, not like a waking up kind of person, like a deer hunting. I like mornings. I would skew 90% towards mornings, and I feel like you typically would skew like 80.
Oh, I love
evenings.
Yeah. I love evening hunts. Now, granted, I like shooting them in the mornings just because usually when you go to track it, you have daylight. And you have to wait till the next morning. So I like shooting them in the morning more, but I enjoy the evening hunts better because things are usually super busy, and you can literally see the world like start shutting down and going to bed, where it's almost like busy, and then it's calm. And then in the mornings, it's like completely opposite, but you get to see the world waking up.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I just enjoy the evening aspect of it more. But if I have a better chance of killing a deer in the mornings, then by God, I'm going to go in the mornings.
I think I've killed, like this year, I've killed one in the evening, but I would say 75% of the bucks I've ever shot have been like in the mornings. Just, I think naturally because of the cold, we don't get a ton of, especially when you're out in Oklahoma. The evenings, November 15th, might be 70 degrees. Like,
yeah.
And does that,
yeah.
So I've always enjoyed the mornings because to me, there's a feeling when you walk out and it's almost like when your nipples start to poke through your shirt a little bit, you're like, deer, like that feels like deer to me.
Feels like hunting season. What the heck?
It feels like hunting season. And even on an October morning with the right cold front, you can feel that. So I always it's a feeling thing. Like I feel like I can see a deer this morning. Whereas evenings are probably just as good, in some instances even better. But
that probably has to go into like your attitude towards the hunt, like whether you walk a little bit further to try to find better sign, or what it might be. Like you feel like you're going in to kill. Does that make sense? Rather than like, oh, it's hot, I'm just going to sit up here, see what I can see.
Mm-hmm. So 100%. Even on a hot spell in the mornings when it's the coolest, I'm like, okay, I could still do this, even if it's 50s or 60s. Like it's cooler than it normally is. Which is interesting though, because in the late season, people almost always exclusively hunt the evenings on food. Like,
yeah, because it's cold. Well, food's different. Like, because I mean, I know if I walk out for a morning sit, kind of in my more open spot on the private, I always seem to bust deer on there
in the mornings.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But in the evenings, they're coming out. That's exactly when they're coming out there, probably and feeding all night. So I've had. I don't know. I still would probably feel good about the mornings. Like if I was going late season, the mornings would probably get me just as pumped up as they do the whole year.
Yeah. That's why I'm not going to wake up at like 8 a.m. and then drive down. I'm going to try to leave super early and get just as much sleep as I would probably if I drove down the night before and slept in my truck.
You probably will just sleep in 5 6 hours.
No, I know I will. I know I will. I know myself.
So are you going to hit some backseat snoozing when you get there?
Are you talking about for the trip?
Like at night, you're gonna hit the back seat.
Yeah. I'm just gonna bring a few sleeping bags, and I actually have an indoor buddy heater that I've never opened.
Where did you get that?
I got it for Christmas like 2 years ago. I don't know.
And it's not. So hold on.
I don't know. I literally read the back of the box just like 3 days ago just to see if it's
safe to use.
It says you can use it indoors, and it has a picture of a tent on it. So if you're able to use it in a small tent, granted, I'm still probably going to crack a window or two if I have to use it. But if it only stays like in the 30s, I have a big like wool sleeping bag, and then I have like a little thin sleeping bag that if it gets super cold, I can just shove inside of it. And I mean, and if I have a buddy heater, and if If I feel that's unsafe, I can just always start my truck for a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. I lean on the side of comfortable and unsafe. Like I like being warm. I'm kind of hot blooded. Like I'll run the heater when it's like in the summer. Just I kind of like the contrast.
But anyways,
I woke up one time on a draw hunt and I was sleeping in the back of my truck and it was 28 that morning, I think, because I made a video about it, about the hunt, and it was like 28 that morning. And I remember just waking up, no sleeping bag, just a blanket. And I was like, this sucks. I do not want to do this. But if you have the right sleeping bag, you're like my sleeping bag.
I have the right one. I just have multiple of them. So 2 + 2 equals
2 wrongs make a right.
Yeah, exactly.
Two wrongs make a right. That mummy sleeping bag that I got, if it's not like 20 and below, I'm like chilling in that thing. That thing is insane. As long as it's not wet, like it happened on our vacation.
Yeah, that sucked. But yeah, apparently it's an indoor one, and I was reading on it, and I think it takes the same propane, but I don't know if it burns differently or I don't know how. But it literally says it's called like the Little Buddy or something like that, and it says indoor. So I might use it, and if I die, make sure Abby collects a fat check or something.
I can see the headline: local man dies of butane poisoning.
Yeah, literally.
Because I've always sent my mom's texted me before while I'm like sleeping in the back of my in the camper shell, and I'll run the buddy heater. And obviously it has side pull out windows, so like you can crack them pretty easy. But she's like, you better crack a window in there. And I'm like, no, it lets out the heat. She's like, I'm serious. But no, I like.
You never crack a window when you do?
I do.
That?
Yeah, I do.
I was about to say.
It's sketchy because when you start to smell a little bit of propane, you're like,
I can't smell, so.
Oh, you're good then.
Yeah.
You'd probably die in peace then.
I will. I'll be snoozing probably about how I want to go. But yeah, it says indoor, but I'll probably still be safe and crack a window if I need to use it. I probably realistically won't even use it.
Yeah.
Because it'll probably be like lows of the 40s.
The year isn't over for folks that are still hunting and haven't filled a single tag. The year's not over. It's actually far from over. Like there's like a third of the season still left. It doesn't feel that way. November always kind of feels a little final, but I shot 2 does on January 14th last year. And I was like, dude, this feels wrong. Like I'm in the next year altogether, but it's not even close to over. So
that's the thing.
Plenty of time.
The bucks are still out there. Like they just didn't vanish off the face of the earth. They're somewhere. Obviously, they might not be running around as much, but you just got to be. I don't know. I don't want to be like Cam Haynes, but like you just got to be a woodsman. But that's not the mentality I'm trying to be. But they might be a little harder to find. But when you do find them, I think they're more killable just because they'll be more patternable.
Well, and just like you kind of said on your trail cameras that you've been seeing recently, I've been seeing a lot more bucks show up on our trail cam. It's like that post rut. Like during the rut, we have most of our cameras on feeders and crossings and stuff. So during the rut, our picture sucked. We did not get very many bucks on camera. But now it seems like, oh, haven't seen him in 3 weeks. There he is. Haven't seen that buck in a month. There he is. And those bucks and some new ones have been trickling in. It finally feels like the ground starts to settle and you start seeing new bucks and bucks that you'd waited to see for a long time. So it's I feel like it returns to normal. It feels more like October. November or December reminds me of like a cold October. Like it's back to a pattern, back to looking for food, that sort of stuff. So it's exciting. You want to do some Q&A?
Yeah, let's do it.
So before we get into the Q&A, I did want to mention some stuff about Exodus. So the last time we talked about some product availability from them, it has changed since then. So the Render, their flagship cell camera, is sold out, and the SP18 solar panel that we run is sold out. But don't fret too much because 2024 product launches are going to come, and they still have the Exodus Rival, the budget cell camera, the Exodus NIS micro diameter. I believe they're a 5mm arrow still for sale, and booster antennas. So there's still a lot of stuff available on the website. I know Christmas is coming up. Not a lot of women listen to this podcast. So if you're a man, feel free to get yourself a Christmas present and wrap it and say from Santa. So
I know I will.
Yeah. Yeah. So check that out. You can also save 15% when you shop at ExodusOutdoorGear.com with code HA15. And everybody that's used the code, we really appreciate it. But that's the stuff. That's what's new for Exodus. And let's move into some Q&A.
Wait,
I got
do
the
we have to
first
talk
one.
about this?
I got the first one. It's a personal message.
Okay, cool.
So, and this was one that it's not often that we get questions that I feel like uniquely qualified to talk about. This was one of them that I was like, oh yeah, we can definitely talk about this.
Let's hear it.
So this one comes from Facebook. Shane Stewart. He said, interested on others' input on hunting deer around cattle, how livestock affects deer movement and habitat, pros and cons, that sort of stuff, and mostly bow hunting is what he's doing. What are your thoughts about that? Have you grown up around hunting around cattle?
Yeah, actually,
And horses.
And horses. If I have to pick one or the other, I think I'd rather hunt around cattle than horses, because horses are just like I know cattle are curious too, but horses are like, they'll knock over feeders, and they'll basically follow you out there. And I don't know. I just don't like. Long story short, I got kicked in the head by a horse, so every horse can basically piss off for all I care. But yeah, I would prefer not to hunt around cattle, but if you have to, and especially food sources, let's say you run a feeder, definitely fence that bad boy up, just like you're trying to keep hogs out of the mix. And go from there. I wish you had this thing written down or something, because I don't.
So it was just input on hunting deer around cattle, how livestock affect deer movement and habitat. The way that I thought about it was, if you have good habitat for cows, you typically don't have good habitat for deer. Those things are usually mutually exclusive. I've seen folks that run cows in deer habitat, and it seems like they just do their best to run it. It's like they're trying to. Any thick place, they're like, let's mow a path through here, even though this is really good bedding.
And it makes it a little bit more tricky, because when we were in Kansas and you didn't know for sure whether or not, like, obviously if the ground's wet and you can see, okay, that's a cow print instead of like a deer track or something like that. It's kind of hard to tell, like, certain trails. Is this a deer trail or is this a cattle trail? Like stuff along that. It just makes it a little bit more difficult. Plus, it could hurt your access. I don't know if this really affects it or not, but when you're walking in, cows, if they see somebody, especially a truck pull up,
dude,
they're like,
so
hey,
annoying.
Food, let's go eat food. So they start bellowing and all that good stuff. And typically they'll follow you out there and sometimes ruin your truck, because I've had a few horses when I park in a pasture or whatever, they'll like get their bottom teeth on my hood.
Scrape that paint off.
Yeah. I got a couple hoods ruined from that. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think? What's your best piece of advice?
You said the Kansas thing that brought it back. Like, a lot of the weehaws that we hunted in Kansas, I would say like 80% of them were just cattle pasture. Like,
it's like those people were just trying to collect like a little check or something, because
they were like, we've got a turd of a quarter section here. Let's let them deer hunt. I'm like, dude, there's 4 trees on the whole place.
I walked on one that was literally just, I don't even think there was a tree on it. If there was, it was like maybe 3 locust trees, and it had a half dried out pond that I'm sure some cows got stuck in at one point, and it was just awful. And they were like, okay, this is a weehaw.
I know. That's typically it. To be fair, I shot my buck in Kansas off of one of those. Like, there was probably 200 head on this place I shot my buck. And I remember getting out of the truck, walking back to this creek in this place, and I'm walking and I'm like, God, there's 50 cows. And I kept walking. I'm like, there's 50 more. And I got down over this hill and I looked down and it was just lit up in the bottom with them. And not that they like browse on, I'm sure they do, but not that they like go eat acorns or eat like stuff that I'm worried about a deer browsing on, or berries or whatever. But they're just annoying to hunt around, because typically it seems like you can't get away from them. Like, they come where you go. And unless you cross like water or have some sort of border or a fence or something, there's nothing stopping them. And they're really curious. Like, I remember hunting growing up. We hunted a lot just on the ground, because you didn't know where deer come from. And when you're hunting with a rifle, who cares? So we'd hunt a lot on the ground, and I would sit down. And when you sit down with your rifle and stuff against the tree, you start, in a cow's eyes, you start disappearing because your frame is, your outline is gone. And so they get like super curious and they start walking up to you. I mean, as close as they can get. And then you move real quick and they all get startled. They're about the
and then they take
animal.
off running, do a circle, and then come right back to you. And it's just like, dude, I'm just trying to stay still. And you're making me chase you down and throw sticks and crap at you.
Yeah, they're about the tastiest animal ever, but they're about the dumbest animal ever too. But tips for hunting around them, I would say like I would try to hunt in some sort of don't is the right option, but hunting in some sort of timber or some sort of topography that a cow wouldn't want to go in and that a deer would. And also, like you said on the access side, it's hard to do this, but if I could get into a place where there are cows without the cows seeing me, that would make me feel a lot better. Because once they see you, they typically do not give up on it. They're like, no, I want to know what that was. And if you disappear in a blind, they're like, let's stand out here until he leaves and make sure that he didn't go in that blind.
Let's put our heads together. Let's really figure this out and see where he went.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they tend to, on the habitat side, the stuff that we hunted in Kansas was just grazed to the bones. Like any browse, any natural native grasses, if you allow them to get in there, they just destroy it. So they're pretty, it depends who you are. If you're a cattle guy, you wouldn't say they're detrimental to the habitat. You say they're getting fat and you're making some bread. But if you're a deer hunter, you would say these things suck and they're very detrimental to it. From a deer hunting perspective, they just don't mix super well. So if you're bow hunting, by the way, rifle hunting's a little bit different.
Yeah, you might catch them crossed on a field or something like that, and maybe have a part of your pasture that's like super thick, like super tall grass or whatever. I don't know, but maybe you can catch them coming out of that. But even for like ponds and stuff. So a little bit of backstory: Christian and I, growing up, we grew up fishing together before we ever started hunting together, and we would always take fish out of my neighbor's creek and throw them in my parents' pond. And it got to the point where you could throw just a worm out there, didn't have to jig it, do anything, and fish would bite it. Now, granted, this pond was meant to be a cattle pond, and it didn't have much cover and didn't have a lot of bait fish. So you would catch an abundance of fish, but they would be super skinny. Long story short, after cattle was put in there, it didn't matter how many like other fish you put in this, you were not able to catch any because the cattle just basically ruined the pond because they'll stand in it, poop in it, and all this stuff. And it just, I don't know, like basically just made it into a big bowl of mud instead of like an actual water hole.
Yeah.
I'm just not a livestock guy, if you can't tell.
Well, I've hunted around them forever, and I can tell you the best way to not get mad at them is not to hunt by them because it's different if they're in a pasture and you can jump a fence and go hunt, your timber and stuff. And like one of the leases that I hunt, there's cattle on it, but the section of the oxbow of the river is fenced off. So it's like you have something in between you and them. In that case, it's not a big deal. But if they can go everywhere you can go, don't be seen going in because they're too curious and they're idiots. And just try to be in places that they don't desire stuff. In which that's pretty fair because I don't feel like deer and cattle, sometimes they'll use the same things like pasture. Obviously you're going to see deer in pasture, but just, I would not prefer it. If I had option A and option B, I would not prefer it, but that's probably the only advice I have on hunting around cattle. God, we learned a lot on the Weehaw stuff. I remember pulling up and just seeing them on there and being like, dang. Nope. Yeah.
All right. So this one comes from Facebook. Have you guys ever had success with the new style rattle bags instead of regular rattle horns? And this is from Trevor Ram, something like that. So Trevor, if you need me to read that again for you, have you guys ever had success with new style rattle bags instead of regular rattling horns?
I haven't personally.
You use the new style rattle bag, don't you? Like
I wouldn't consider myself a huge like rattler, but yeah, I have in the past. I've watched my dad rattle a buck in with one of those bags, but I feel like one of the issues with the bags is it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's super convenient because it's real small and you can just shove it in the bag.
Packable.
But if you've ever heard a deer fight in real life, it doesn't sound like that. Like you can't get loud.
They throw
enough.
down.
With the videos on National Geographic where you see two desert bighorns hit each other like at 80 miles an hour, skull to skull.
Yeah.
That's kind of how deer fight. Like they pin their ears back, and when they hit together, Peyton's heard it on the lease this year for the first time, like deer actually fighting. He's like, dude, it's loud. And I said, I know. I watched it for the first time probably 5 or 6 years ago, and it just, so when I started hunting with Jake Ayers, I watched him rattle with traditional rattling horns. He had the eye guards cut off of them. And I wondered, why do you have the eye guards cut off them? Obviously, because you bang your hands, right?
Your thumbs are gone.
But I was like, there's no way he's hitting them with enough force that you need to cut the eye guards off. He would get them, and I mean, wingspan, far as you can get your hands apart, boom, 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 boom. And it would
almost
hurt
have
my ears.
Safety glasses.
Yeah, like sparks coming off them. It would hurt my ears. And then you'd see a buck just come out of the timber. And ever since I've watched deer actually fight in person, and I've seen people rattle with success, I would prefer a set of rattling horns. Are they super small and light to bring into most spots? No. But if you're like a run and gun public guy, and maybe you hunt saddle and you get a mile back there, I think a rattle bag can work. You're not going to get as much distance. I've seen it work. Watch my dad shoot a nice 7-point doing that. But they work. I just don't think it's ideal for from a realism perspective. It doesn't sound the most real.
Well, I carry like actual rattling antlers with me, and the only reason I do that and like haven't broke down and bought like a rattle bag or anything is just, now granted I'm stubborn because I don't find very many sheds, and so I never want to like just saw the eye guards. So I keep the eye guards on and I just kind of hold it like this, but I still try to swing them together. And after talking to Bronson Strickland about like it was him and Dr. Mickey, I can't think of his last name.
I know who you're talking about. Is it A&M guy?
I think Mickey Hellickson. That's what it is.
Yeah, that's right.
So they did a study where they basically got on a ranch and they had an observation tower, and one did an observation tower where they could kind of see this, like I don't know how far surrounding it, but I guess they could see it pretty good ways over all these like little yucca bushes and like short timber. I think they're in like Texas somewhere, so you can kind of know the hill country and kind of flat, but or somewhere around Texas. Well, one person would be on the ground rattling, and they did a study whether what worked best on certain times of day. So like, did a loud short sequence work better than a soft long sequence? And then they did everything in between. And they found that it didn't matter if it was loud and short or loud and long, but as long as it was loud, it got the attention of bucks more than the soft. Like, how people all the time like, oh, I just went in there and I just barely ticked them together. Well, that's probably because the deer was already close by. Now
they probably didn't even hear that crap.
Yeah, but the grand scheme of things is like, the deer isn't going to react to what it can't hear. And so if you're just barely, shuffling the bag, kind of like what you're saying, not only does it not sound real, but the deer probably can't hear it. And so he even said at one point they watched the buck, like the buck would only walk towards them as long as the sound was going. As long as he heard bucks fighting, he would travel. And as soon as the buck stopped fighting, which as soon as the dude quit hitting the rattling antlers together, the buck would just like start doing its own thing again, like start walking away. And then when they continued, he would turn around. And so basically, like, you got to be aggressive with it, is what he was saying.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I probably have somewhat limited experience rattling in. I've rattled in a few deer. But I've you can see it in our rutcation video last year when Justin shot his 16-point. I rattled in that video, but I hit the bag together like this, kind of just looked like a Native American trying to start a fire, like that sort of thing. And then I would take it and hit it against the tree because that makes the loudest clack in there. But you don't have a lot of space in between those little logs in there. So even hitting them against the tree, it still doesn't even make enough noise to hurt my ears. And I'm 2 feet away from it. So 70, 80, 90 yards away, you're probably like,
through
what
the
is that?
winds and the
Yeah.
hills, depending on the topography. I used it when I shot my 2021 buck. So a few days before actually it's like 5 days to a week before I actually shot him, I was sitting in the blind on just the same little area, but just a different part of the field. And one evening I got bored. I wasn't seeing much, maybe a few does. I absolutely just started smoking the antlers together because I don't know. I was just going to try to rattle, and I knew like loud was probably better. I hit the antlers together, and not 5 minutes after I put the antlers down, I see a deer walking out, and I was like, okay. And no. So there's two different times I rattled, and it was the same exact spot when the blind was in the same exact location.
Mhm.
First time was in 2020. I already tagged out, and so it was like November. It was during rifle season, so November 18th to like the 20 whatever. I was trying to get Abby a buck, and this is when I had we had that buck we called Greatness.
Greatness, yep.
And so I slammed the horns together because we didn't see a thing all evening, and we were literally going to pack up early and go home. It was probably 20 minutes before dark, and she was kind of ready, and I was like, whatever. This is supposed to be fun. I'm not like here to. I'm not going to force you to stay. So if you want to leave, we can leave.
Mhm.
But I was like, as we were packing up, I already had the camera like put in the bag and all that stuff. We're about to leave, and I hit the rattle and antlers, and not 30 seconds later, what I think was Greatness, a big old 8-point steps out from the left and immediately starts walking down the tree line. The only reason I think it was him and not just a different buck was just because Greatness would have been an older deer, and he seemed like he's been through the ringer a time or two. Now, granted, around here that could be 2 years old and he's already been through the ringer, but
as a 6-year-old, he's probably been about 24 ringers.
yeah. So he steps out and like holds really tight to the edge, but he's following the direction where he heard the rattling, which is straight towards us. And at this point, he's maybe 80 yards, but he's coming towards us. And he steps out, and as he's walking, he doesn't see anything. And so that's when he starts heading back up the tree line. And the whole time I'm trying to get Abby positioning, like make sure it's it's off safety, after it's already up on her shoulder and all that stuff. And as she's trying to get on him, he dips back in the timber. And so I smoke them together again, and he steps back out and starts walking back down the timber again. And at this point, like she's in shambles, I'm in shambles. Long story short, she couldn't get on him in time. And so fast forward to 2021, I try to use the rattle and antlers again, and I had like 2 good bucks that I had on camera out in the field, and then I had 2 little smaller bucks. I'm just saying, this sounds like a great property. This was the best hunt I've ever had in my life out here.
You're telling the creme de la creme stories.
Yeah, seeing multiple bucks in one sit. I had 2 nice bucks out there. One came out there and started kind of like messing around with the other ones, with the 2 little ones, but they were just kind of sparring around. So he's like, you ain't a problem. And then I hit him again because they were on the opposite side of the field, and they put their head up. They were curious, but they didn't see another deer over here. And so they're like, I'm not going to go over there if I don't see anything.
Mhm.
Well, that made another buck come out and like kind of posture up to the other buck. And these are both 8 points. One was like just an average kind of decently wide 8-point. The other one was like a high and tight one. And I was like, oh, it's about to go down. He started like kind of posturing up to the wide 8-point. And I hit them together again. They would both look. Didn't see anything. So I think if you go to rattle, unless you're just like in a super tight cover place, I think you almost need to pair it with a decoy.
Right. If you have any visibility at all.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If they can
we're hunting.
No, I was just saying, if there's a way for them to visually confirm whether that was BS or not, you probably need a decoy in most situations. And like, I remember seeing Casey, he remember when he rattled that buck in on a buck truck, that big wide one in Kansas. He got down below a berm and started rattling. And so the buck had to come over the topography, and it was like believable because it's like, oh, the buck could be behind this hill,
Right.
But when you're in the flat or in the wide open and you rattle and they're like, dude, we're in a field. I don't see that. Like, that situation, probably not. I mean,
but 5 days later, I moved because I'm like, okay, this was before I had the decoy idea. I'm just going to move to where I would probably have a shot if they did come out like that and move the same way they went out. But the next time I went out there, I brought a decoy with me. And when I rattled, I don't know if that's what brought the buck in, but I've never seen that buck before in my life. And I rattled and it actually seen a decoy. Now, granted, in the video, I got a big old corn pile right there. So
Yellow
you could
nugs.
say one way or the other, whether he was coming to the rattle and the decoy or if he was coming to the corn. Well, where he came from, he had to loop around to like actually come from this way because it's just like straight creek. And so he was trying to get downwind of this decoy. So I assumed he came into the decoy rather than just coming into the corn. But that's just mine.
He didn't walk straight in to like eat the corn either. Like he walked and like stopped and looked. And then, I mean, you shot him when he stopped and looked. But
yeah,
the decoy definitely had something to play. If it wasn't 100%, it was up there. He came into the decoy.
So I guess just to summarize it, that's my tip. I know you're just asking about just the rattle bags, whether they work or not, but I'm just saying I think they could work. You might as well try it if you're super aggressive with it. Is there better options? Probably. But if you do, depending on the terrain and topography, just try to pair it with a decoy. That's all I would say.
And it's probably like, is there certain situations where it could work? Like, yes, absolutely. And is it better to carry it than have no rattling horns? Maybe, possibly. I'm not huge on like blind calling. Like I never really have a ton of success on like, oh, I'm not seeing anything. Let me hit a few grunts. Let me hit a few rattles. That rarely ever works for me. It worked out for Curly that one time.
Yeah, but we
knew that there was a deer in there.
Yeah, we heard him like rubbing on a tree or something, like or thrashing around on something because you were like, I don't know if that's a squirrel or an actual deer, and that's when we hit the grunt. And then 2 minutes later, we were like, buck, buck, buck.
Mm-hmm.
So that was
I'm not a huge blind caller, but I think like for the blind calling circumstances, the rattle bag is probably not the best idea. You don't get a lot of coverage. You can't send that sound very far. I might want to bring a set of rattling antlers.
So what's your take on grunting? When
like
would you grunt?
Grunting? Like when I saw a deer.
Yeah.
When I could see his reaction, because my issue is how many times have you been sitting in the woods and you haven't seen anything and you haven't heard anything, and then you look over 30 yards away and you hear the first step of a deer and they're right there. Like,
yeah, most of the time.
A lot of the time. My issue is if when I blind grunt and stuff, the likelihood of something being within 100 yards, especially if it's prime time and I'm in a good area, probably pretty high. So I'm giving away my position with a grunt. And if I'm hunting in a place that is thicker, I'd be more apt to do it. But if I'm hunting in a place that's somewhat open, that deer can hear the grunt immediately and be like, dude, BS.
Yeah.
You know, I because it's crazy when you blind call or grunt, when they hear it, they know exactly where it is.
Oh, like, they can pinpoint for sure. It's almost like turkey hunting.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember when we went down to Jesse's, you would call, and now granted it wasn't a tom that came in, but he was gobbling back to us. But that hen got within like 20 yards of us and we're just like looking around like, where the hell are you?
Because she knew exactly where that came from.
And she stood there for like 5 minutes. She said, I could have swore I heard it from right here. And sure enough, we were sitting there like, I think both shaking, even though it was a hen. But it was like, I mean, it was just cool because like she literally came from, I don't know, 60 yards in the end of timber and came to exactly where basically the tree we were at.
Oh, and deer are just as good at that as turkeys, maybe even.
I would say better just because turkey's brain are like that. But
yeah.
Anyways,
I think a huge guy like that.
I think grunting. I think I'm right there with you. Like if I see deer, that's usually, even if I'm not like trying to kill it, because if I'm just super bored, and especially on public or something, if I see a spike or something that I'm just going to fiddle around with this guy, I'll start grunting at him. And I think that's what honestly killed that deer in 2022 or 2020 as well.
You're grunting at your biggest buck ever. You're grunting at a spike.
I was grunting at a spike just because I was bored out of my mind, and he was hot on some doe. I'm just going to see what he will do. And then sure enough, after they ran off, I mean, because I don't know why else that buck would have stayed around after it looked me in the eyes.
It thought something else was there.
Exactly.
Well, and then you can take it the opposite way, because the buck that I shot in 2021 on Oklahoma Public, that wide 8-pointer, no brows, that deer, he walks into 75 yards, and I'm like, buh, buh, buh. I mean, I'm hitting him like with a Thanos
When was
grunt.
this?
2021.
Okay.
The-
Yep.
Yeah. And the one that I had to shoot 3 times, that buck.
Community center. Yeah.
Yep. That buck, I hit him like 3 times, like 75 yards away, and he'd throw his head up. He wouldn't even look my direction. He'd be like, whatever. And then I like hit it. Some of them, it's interesting because you hit some of them and they like are curious. Others you hit them and it's like that it's not even happening. They're like, I don't care. Like some of them just act that way. So
That's just a personality thing, I think.
I think it's some people like hunting that way. Similar to like people that call elk. They're like, I don't want to kill an elk unless he's bugling. Some people like, oh, I want to call in a buck. I want to rattle in a buck. We grew up hunting in places where if you rattle, that's pretty much the first sign for them to be like, I'm out.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
I choose life.
Especially the places that we, even the places that we hunt public, people play the grunt flute and the rattle tube, like, or on the rattle drums, like it's an instrument, like they're trying to get the first chair. People play them all the time.
I heard it when we were on our vacation because it's when I actually found deer for once. I walked by this guy's stand on this opposite finger trying to get to my area, and which I guess he didn't know I was there, but the whole time, that whole morning, it was just like I know what he was trying to do. He was trying to paint a picture because he would start out. He was on like maybe 200 yards away. He'd start out burr, 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 and then all of a sudden, 2 seconds later, bang, 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 just smacking the antlers together. And the rattling sounded like pretty good, but just after hearing him just grunt, obviously for probably like a blind grunt, because he did it like every 30 minutes. That just discouraged me even more to like never blind grunt like that and like try to be that loud, because it just did not sound realistic. Because usually when you hear a grunt, unless they're just absolutely hot on a doe where they're like, bleh, bleh, just chasing, I've never heard a deer just from, like, oh, that's the first sign I've ever heard of him, like besides the walking, is just him grunting. Like I've never heard it, like found out a deer was right next to me just because of it. It was grunting. Usually it's in walking distance.
And then you hear the grunt as they're walking.
Exactly.
Like, bup, bup, bup. It's usually pretty shallow and not loud. But, and you think about it this way, how many times have you been sitting in the stand and you heard a massive buck fight, grunts going, they get like, you don't hear vocalizations a ton. And if you do, it's typically in November and on private land. And I don't hear a ton of buck fights. Like on public, I've probably heard 2 or 3. And so people try to paint those pictures. I think about that all the time. Like there's folks that will call on October 1st, like they're making a buck fight and like it's an Armageddon. And I just sit back and I think, how many times have I heard that in the woods? And I spent a lot of hours in the woods across a few different states, and hardly ever. So I think people do a hell of a lot more harm with a grunt tube and rattling horns than they do good for the most part, especially on public.
Yeah. All right. I think we beat that one enough.
Is it my question? Yep.
Yes.
46th State Hunt said, what sources for deer biology do you use and which one of them do you trust the most? State wildlife departments, college researchers, private research institutions, federal government agencies, etc.
None. I just listen to podcasts. That's about it.
But a lot of those are colleges, researchers, private research. Which ones do you listen to?
I would think if it's strictly deer biology, the best information I think you can get is I've said his name quite a few times on here, but Bronson Strickland has a podcast. I don't know how often they put them out anymore, but they got a whole library full. It's just type in Deer Lab on the podcast app.
And MSU Deer Lab, right?
Yeah. Listen to their stuff, because that's a dude that if there's a Dr. Deer, that would be him. Mm-hmm. And I know Christian made fun of his hairline last time he was on the podcast, but
so probably won't have him back on.
Yeah, so
he probably won't come back on. No, I'm just kidding. He's super nice.
That's 100% who I would listen to, because you'll learn everything to how to rattle to like the ins and outs of why a buck gets super big and what basically goes into it. So That's what I would say. That's where you can learn like how nutrition and water go into actually like why nutrition equals big racks.
Mm-hmm. I think another one, we did a full deer science month about this. We had 4
Are you plugging
weeks.
yourself right now?
I'm plugging because it was good.
Jesus.
Like, objectively speaking, not because of us, because of the quality of the guests that came on.
Well, that's a good one.
Yeah. We had we did a full deer science month talking all about the senses of whitetail deer. So you should check that out because it's got some of these people on it. And then one person that I listen to and I like consuming content from is Dr. Marcus Lashley from University of Florida. And they have a podcast. They have a deer lab as well. Any college that has a deer lab is typically pretty credible on this sort of stuff because they have actual resources that study it day in and day out. But
it's factual resource or research and not just like anecdotal data from like your Uncle Joe and your neighbor down the road.
Exactly. I had like an hour and a half long conversation with Marcus on the podcast too. We talked about the effects of feral hogs on deer, coyotes. We talked about burns. He's like a huge advocate of burning and what that does for antler quality and nutrition. So I would say I don't consume a lot of stuff from the state level. I would say the universities and the researchers and the people that work in those sort of things, like MSU Deer Lab, Florida Deer Lab. I know Texas A&M puts out a ton of stuff. Another one's National Deer Association.
Ooh, that's good.
They do a really good job. So they're a nonprofit organization, and they cite a lot of research from all those people.
Who's the guy? You've had him on the podcast, I think, twice.
Lindsey Thomas Jr.?
Yes. Well, yeah, I think so. He has like short beard, scruff. If you follow their TikTok and stuff like that, they have a lot of like super educational short form stuff, like why deer, grow antlers from their face, just, I don't know, just a lot of weird stuff. So even if you don't want to get down to the nitty gritty and you can't like fully listen to a long drawn out podcast and you just want to like dumb scroll through some stuff, you can definitely check out theirs because they have some short tidbits like that.
We had Matt Ross from the National Deer Association. We had Kip Adams from the National Deer Association. They're both biologists.
Who I was thinking.
Kip's who you're thinking about. Yeah. We had them both on for Deer Science Month, and we had Gino D'Angelo, Dr. Gino D'Angelo from University of Georgia, I believe is where he's from.
I really liked him. He was super down to earth.
He was really fun to talk to. Yeah, Bronson. We had Dr. Bronson Strickland on, and then a couple months later, I had Dr. Marcus Lashley on. So there's probably 5, 6, 7 hours of deer science stuff if you're into the weeds on that stuff, which if you're asking,
and it breaks it down by like specific. Yeah. So you have vision, one about like vision. Yeah, exactly.
It's all broken down there. And if you're asking what source for deer biology do you use, you sound pretty in the weeds already. So those are all good podcasts. We have a full playlist on our YouTube channel for our podcast channel. So, and the people we had on were freaking top notch. I think we had 3, 4, 5 of the best folks in deer research. So,
but I'm just saying, knowing all that ain't going to help you kill a deer because I literally from like word of mouth from the biologists themselves, and I still got a buck tag to fill in Oklahoma. So, I mean,
it's applied knowledge, not herd knowledge. Okay, I think you're up
my
next.
turn, isn't it? I would like to hear your thoughts on targeting bucks on small parcels. I have 20 acres, and it's hard to not stink up the woods throughout the season. This is user 16603769028.
And they have he's definitely on his third TikTok. Because
yeah.
You don't get a name like that.
Okay, here we go. At Luke Schinzel. Yep.
Luke Schinzel. He's holding a nice, looks like an Eastern turkey. He had a follow-up to it too. He said, and that makes it hard to kill big deer because they know you are in there. I've heard Don Higgins talk about this quite a bit, and I've seen this in my own experience growing up hunting like a 40-acre piece. The smaller the parcel, the less you can go in there, in my mind, because the less access points you're going to have, the less wind directions you can probably hunt it on. 100%. I would say in a super small parcel like that, the only time I'd be going in would be to kill something. I wouldn't be hunting that one for a hobby or just to get out of the house, because a mature buck is not going to stay in a place after he's bumped multiple times. And I'd be waiting for the right wind direction. I'd probably have a cell camera in there to limit human intrusion. If you don't have that, I definitely have some other sort of trail camera. And honestly, I would be hunting in on the peak weather fronts at the right times of the year, because you can spend all of October in there. And if it's 96 degrees and you hunt on the wrong winds, your odds of finding a big deer is pretty freaking low. So that's what I would say about small parcel.
So I would say, now, granted, it's almost half the size, but I know a guy. It depends what your property looks like too, because I know a guy who has like 35 acres and they killed, I think the last 2 years. It ain't good, like by QDMA standards, but they killed like six bucks off of a 35 acre piece. And one was like 172. The other one, I mean, the others were very shootable bucks as well, like great bucks. So it all depends on your parcels and stuff, but and like your surrounding things. But I guess you gotta kind of figure out like where you think they're coming from, and exactly what Christian said. Like it's a lot easier to screw up, and especially you have to be a lot more careful on your access and your wind, and those go hand in hand. Like your access has to match your wind as well. But other than that, like, since you're not going to be able to hunt it probably the majority of the time, unless you're just like in deer heaven in there. But I assume from your follow-up comment about it makes it hard to kill big deer, that's not the case where you have just an abundant, timber on your property and around your property. So I mean, the best thing I would say is like find a new spot to hunt. Like obviously keep that on the back burner, and then go hunt public. And if you don't have public close, then like maybe make a weekend trip if you can, because I mean that's kind of part of it. I mean, you and I both struggled with that a lot, where you only have a certain amount of acreage to hunt, and you can't. It seems like there's not a big deer anywhere in the area, and if it is, it's probably going to be nocturnal. Just because we went in, we used to stink up the area just because we didn't know any better about like playing the wind and stuff. So we'd go hunt it on a completely wrong wind, and then 2 weeks later wonder why we haven't had any encounters going through there. But also, it might be an area where I don't know exactly where you live. It just might not be a big buck state. So you have to be realistic also, like what's a big buck in your area? Or you might be in my position where you're in a big buck area, but your parcel of land is just kind of like, it's not set up the right way. And especially if you don't own the land, then it's hard to kill big deer if big deer aren't on you. So I would say go find those big deer, whether that be public, and then always have that on the back burner. Keep a cell cam, just plug in Exodus. You can use our code, get a little bit of discount on that. But have a cell cam in there, and where it monitors it. And if you have one showing up pretty consistently, or heck, even just 1 or 2 times, and you have the right wind, go in and kill it. And then your other time to scratch that itch of wanting to hunt, go use it on checking out, finding new spots on public.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you love to hunt, this probably 20 acres is not going to be where you get to hunt a ton and kill a big buck. You might be able to hunt a few times and shoot one, but you're not going to be able to go every weekend or every day and that kind of thing.
I have a little bit more acreage to hunt than obviously 20 acres, but even on my acreage, I'm scared to even shoot a doe in there, because I'm like, I don't want to mess up anything if there's even anything on there.
Right. You probably have 20 acres of timber. That's probably maybe less. Yeah.
I would say less.
Well, because just like you said, growing up, I mean, I would hunt my grandparents' 40, and I would go in, and if I went on the wrong wind and hunted and didn't see any deer, like if there was situations where I wouldn't see a deer for a week because I went in and did that. Like a 20 acre piece, quite literally, you could walk in and run for a couple weeks in one hunt. So I'd be very diligent about hunting it. And and if you love to hunt, you're one of the guys that loves to be out all the time, like you said, find some public or work on getting more access, because you can definitely kill a big deer on 20 acres, but you're not going to be able to kill a big deer on 20 acres and hunt the volume that you probably want to. So
yeah,
I think that's good. Last one is TWON.18 said, any advice on using decoys? Just picked up a buck and a doe Montana decoy. Never used them before. Thanks. What do you got for this, man?
I think we already covered that in the rattling one, did we?
About the decoys?
Yeah.
Is that the only experience you have using decoys?
I mean, oh, so yeah, basically.
Did you have another one that came up that you're thinking about?
Well, I was thinking I didn't cover that buck, but I did. I mean, if you're going to use a decoy, like I think the best time to use it would obviously be during the rut, but put it in an open spot, kind of like a field or something, where the deer can see it from a ways away, and then that way, like especially if you're in a scenario like you're hunting over a wheat field or maybe a soybean field or something like that, where there's literally food everywhere. Because like in Kansas, we ran into that where we'd see deer on the opposite side of the soybean field, but it's like, what's going to bring them over here? There's nothing to, unless they just by happenstance to walk through this little spot and try to go under me. There's no reason or rhyme or reason why that deer should come to right here. But if you have a decoy, and especially if it's during the rut where they're looking, and kind of like your Texas buck where it might be a little bit pissed off, I mean, that's just a little bit easier way to get them in range.
Yeah, high visibility.
It gives them a reason to come in range, I should say.
Yeah, I think that's good. He said he has a buck and a doe decoy. I don't know a lot about using them in tandem because I've never. I guess that's just one more piece of the puzzle of getting a deer pretty fired up and pissed off. You have to understand the risk you're using with a decoy. Some deer are going to be pretty timid on a decoy. Some are going to hate it, and some are going to love it, like depending on the personality of the buck. So there could be a big antler buck that sees a decoy and goes, nope, and walks the other direction. Like, and I know a lot of big deer are pretty antisocial, so maybe that's something to consider. But like you said, yeah, using it during the rut, positioning in a place with high visibility. I've seen calling, and like you said before, calling, rattling. I would be a lot more apt to do those sort of things if I had a decoy. Kind of think that covers some of the. I just think using those two things in tandem works a little bit better. But I've seen it work pretty well with Jake Ayers too. Setting decoys out on wheat fields and having bucks come up to them. I've never had one ram the decoy, but I've had them up, ears pinned back, sitting 2 feet from them, like I want to, but I'm not going to. That sort of thing. And I've actually seen a decoy start a buck fight. Like I saw one. Really? Yeah, we had a 110-inch 8-point come in, and he was like posturing up to the decoy and would get a couple feet, and like he'd like flinch at it, kind of act like he's going to hit it. Move, yeah, and it never moved. And so he turned around, and a buck was walking out of the wheat field the entire time out into the middle. And by the time he had turned around, that other buck was like 30 yards away, and they both put their ears back and started doing that. And they ran and just boom, hit heads.
Really?
Dust flying in the wheat field. Yeah. And also I would say, consider where the deer are coming from, and that a buck is probably going to try to get downwind of that decoy. So I would position it in a place where downwind of that decoy gives you a good shot opportunity. Because if he comes in and, have a nice buck come out and it doesn't work the decoy in the right way.
That is true. That is true. Most of the time, like if they see it, they're going to want to get downwind of it just to scent check it.
And you can use that to your advantage. Put the downwind portion of the decoy, do a little pocket where if he comes downwind of it, there's a shot, So that's just something to consider. I've probably hunted a dozen times with the decoy, not much more than that. I know it can work. It can probably just as easily mess you up. So there's kind of a risk versus reward kind of thing. And I think we're past the part of the year where it really matters that much.
Yeah. Yeah, probably. Unless you're just trying to get like a social deer, maybe it might be the same scenario where they might not be like fired up and like wanting to kill it, but they're like, hey, there's deer over there. Let's just go over there.
Well, I know those Dave Smith decoys look so real that they are social creatures. Maybe a Dave Smith decoy or a Montana decoy that looks pretty real could bring other deer in.
Well, I've had doe so when I shot that buck, either that 2021 buck, I call it the decoy buck, but after I shot that, I was already, since I seen it go down, I was at the buck, like filming it, and it wasn't all the way dark yet. And there was does like where it was looking at me and then looking at the decoy, like, why isn't that deer running? Mm-hmm. And so they never ran either. And so I think if you're like on the ground and like trying to bang one out behind some like quick cover, that's just something. I mean, it can just be used as a tactic to like like focus the attention over here and not on you. So if you're in a spot that like isn't the best cover for you, throw a decoy out just as an attention getter. And like that's kind of what I realized just off that little encounter. Like, hey, that is like normally if especially where we hunt, if a doe sees you, it's gone. Like that's the reason why I hang or put my feeders like 40 yards from my stand. It's just because like if you even move wrong and like the deer doesn't see any other deer there, it's like see you later. But in that instance, I was kind of like, oh, that might be a good thing. That's pretty cool to know.
Yeah. And that's good points. And that's the last question.
Well,
this is a fun
10
episode.
more questions. Yeah, it was
10 more. Yeah. 10 more. We appreciate you guys checking out the podcast, listening. I think that's all we got for this one.
Also, if you guys see this, cool shirt I have right here, I'll do it for the good camera. You see the shirt?
That's
nice. You can actually get those on our website. That's right.
huntersadvantagemerch.com. We appreciate you guys checking it out. If you guys want us to do more Q&A, let us know. We'll post kind of TikTok, Facebook, Instagram videos from time to time where we kind of collect questions. We are not the experts and know all authorities on deer hunting, but we do have some sort of opinions and experiences. And if we don't, we'll just tell you, I don't know. So be on the lookout for those. And also, please make sure to leave us a rating and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. We asked you last time, and I don't know if I saw some new ones on Spotify. I didn't see any new ones on Apple yet. So please leave them on Apple. We appreciate you guys. But with that, we will catch you guys in the next one.
Jesus loves you.
Bye.